Okay, we're continuing on Paul Sartre's Being and Nothingness audiobook, video 2. Once we get away from what Nietzsche called the illusion of worlds behind the scene, and if we no longer believe in the being behind the appearance, then the appearance becomes full positivity. Its essence is an appearing which is no longer opposed to being, but on the contrary is the measure of it. For the being of an existent is exactly what it appears. Thus we arrive at the idea of the phenomenon, such as we can find, for example, in the phenomenology of Husserl or of Heidegger, the phenomena or the relative absolute. Relative, the phenomenon remains, for to appear supposes in essence somebody to whom to appear. But it does not have the double relativity of Kant's. It does not point over its shoulder to a true being which would be for it absolute. What it is, absolutely, for it reveals itself as it is. The phenomenon can be studied and described as such, for it is absolutely indicative of itself. The duality of potency in acts falls by the same stroke. The act is everything. Behind the act there is neither potency, nor hexis, nor virtue. We shall refuse, for example, to understand by genius in the sense in which we say that Proust had genius, or that he was a genius, a particular capacity to produce certain works, which was not exhausted exactly in producing them. The genius of Proust is neither the work considered in isolation, nor the subjective ability to produce it. It is the work considered as the totality of the manifestation of the person. That is why we can equally well reject the dualism of appearance and essence. The appearance does not hide the essence, it reveals it. It is the essence. The essence of an existence is no longer a property sunk in the cavity of this existence. It is the manifest law which presides over the succession of its appearances. It is the principle of the series. To the nominalism of Poincare, defining a physical reality, an electric current, for example, as a sum of its various manifestations, Duhem rightly opposed his own theory, which makes of the concept of the synthetic unity of these manifestations. To be sure, phenomenology is anything but a nominalism, but essence is the principle of the series, is definitely only the concentration of appearances, that is, itself an appearance. This explains how it is possible to have an intuition of essences. The phenomenal being manifests itself. It manifests its essence as well as its existence, and it is nothing but the well-connected series of its manifestations. Does this mean that by reducing the existence to its manifestations, we have succeeded in overcoming all dualisms? It seems rather that we have converted them all into a new dualism, that of finite and infinite. Yet the existent, in fact, cannot be reduced to a finite series of manifestations, since each one of them is a relationship to a subject constantly changing. Although an object may disclose itself only through a single sole fact of there being a subject, implies the possibility of multiplying the points of view on that. This suffices to multiply to infinity the under consideration. Further, if the series of appearances were finite, that would mean that the first appearance do not have the possibility of reappearing, which is absurd, or that they can be all given at once, which is still more absurd. Let us understand indeed that our theory of the phenomenon has replaced the reality of the thing by objectivity of the phenomenon, and that it has passed this on to an appeal to infinity. The reality of that cup is that it is there, and that it is not me. We shall interpret this by saying that the series of appearances is bound by a principle which does not depend on my whim, but the appearance reduced to itself, and without reference to the series of which it is a part, could be only an intuitive and subjective plenitude, the manner in which the subject is affected. If the phenomenon is to reveal itself as transcended, it is necessary that the subject himself transcend the appearance toward the total series of which it is a member. He must seize red through his impression of red. By red is meant the principle of the series, the electric current through the electrolysis, etc. But if the transcendence of the object is based on the necessity of causing the appearances to be always transcended, the result is that on principle an object posits a series of appearances as infinite. Thus the appearance which is finite indicates itself in its finitude. But at the same time, in order to be grasped as an appearance of that which appears, it requires that it be surpassed toward infinity. This new opposition, the finite and the infinite, or better, the infinite in the finite, replaces the dualism of being and appearance. What appears in fact is only an aspect of the object, and the object is altogether in that aspect and altogether outside of it. It is altogether within it, in that it manifests itself in that respect. It shows itself as the structure of the appearance, which is at the same time the principle of the series. It is altogether outside, for the series itself will never appear, nor can it appear. Thus the outside is opposed in a new way to the inside, and the being which does not appear to the appearance. Similarly, a certain potency returns to inhabit the phenomenon and confer on it its very transcendence. A potency to be developed in a series of real or possible appearances. The genius of Proust, even when reduced to the works produced, is no less equivalent to the infinity of possible points of view which can take on that work, and which we will call inexhaustibility of Proust's works. But is not this inexhaustibility, which implies a transcendence and a reference to the infinite, is this not a hexis at the exact moment when one apprehends it on the object? The essence finally is radically severed from the individual appearance which manifests itself, since on principle it is that which must be able to be manifest by an infinite series of individual manifestations. In thus replacing a variety of oppositions by a single dualism on which they all are based, we have gained or lost. This we shall soon see. For the moment, the first consequence of the theory of the phenomenon is that the appearance does not refer to being, as Kant's phenomenon refers to the noumenon. Since there is nothing behind the appearance, and since it indicates only itself, it can not be supported by any being other than its own. The appearance cannot be the thin film of nothingness which separates the being of the subject from the absolute being. If the essence of the appearance is an appearing which is no longer opposed to any being, there arises a legitimate problem concerning the being of this appearing. In this problem, which will be our first concern, and which will be the point of departure for our inquiry into being and nothingness.